It's the best of times or worst of times. Worst of times, I think, for obvious reasons. Hacking, Leveson, an unprecedented number of journalists being arrested. And I think it's the best of times as well, which is a really good opportunity to learn some lessons, not just about how we sort of change the plumbing of self-regulation and things like that, but how journalists think about their profession.
I think we ought to regard the Leveson inquiry as being a mirror into which we, as an industry, especially the tabloid industry, looks and it sees an honest reflection of itself.
So for us, we were really pleased the fact that the Leveson inquiry and the remit was so broad, and it's looking at the important things. It's looking at the culture, the practices and the ethics of the press. Now this is an unprecedented kind of opportunity for these issues to be debated and assessed in the public domain.
Gosh, I never know whether to laugh or cry at Leveson. I welcome Leveson. On the other hand, it is by no means a perfect inquiry. I mean, I think it's deeply flawed. It's flawed because he's not really looking at the ethics at all. He says he's looking beyond hacking. To my knowledge, so far, he's not called any PRs or lobbyists. I can't think for precedent, and I'll probably be corrected immediately, but I can't think for precedent where you have a public inquiry running in parallel to a criminal investigation.
And one of the things that we want to see from, as a result of Leveson, is the implementation of a conscience clause, so that when journalists are put in a position of potentially breaking their code of conduct, they can actually turn around to their boss and say, actually, no, I'm not doing that, and they know that they've got protection in law.
Michelle's absolutely right. There is an appalling culture of bullying in Fleet Street. And if somebody wasn't performing, or somebody had gone off the boil, they might have won strings of awards, over many years. If suddenly they went off the boil, the pressure would be relentless. They think, I've got 2 children at private school, and I've got a big mortgage, and I'm going to get sacked. What's the worst of 2 evils? Do I hack the phone? Keep my job? Get more stories coming in? I'm not saying that's what happened, but it leads to that type of behaviour.
And I'm only here because of journalists. And I think the lesson to learn from this is that how important journalists are. None of this, we would not be here tonight, and we would not be having this inquiry if it wasn't for the journalists who've helped me.
If you stop people going undercover, you stop subterfuge. Let's not kid ourselves. We do not live in an open society. We live in a very closed society. We might have a Freedom of Information Act, but it's very hard to find out. I can tell you, it is extremely difficult to find out things.
Chris is talking about the threat to investigative journalism as well, and it's become something of an endangered species in far too many newsrooms because of the resources that it takes, and so many newsroom, being counters just simply don't invest the money that it takes to do these things properly, and that's not a consequence of, ethics or a clampdown on from Leveson. That's just because the way they've been running that's the business model that's bust, frankly, in this country.
On the Independent, which I can safely say didn't hack partly because it's got no money at all, and we can't afford to. But we didn't have. Really, that's true. I mean, if we could have hacked in the public interest, we probably would have done. I did say in the public interest there.
Just parking to one side the faults of the News of the World, I think we all take that as read. What it did do very well was very good investigative journalism. Not always brilliantly. Sometimes it was wrong, but we did some hellishly good scoops on that paper, which was followed up week after week, year after year, by newspapers all over Fleet Street and all around the world.
I sort of hear Neville on the News of the World. When it closed, there was all this outpouring of grief, and I never realised it was the New York Times that was closing. Yes, it did some fantastic investigations. It also did an awful lot of pretty sleazy stuff into people. Too much journalistic time and effort was spent investigating people. In the end, didn't matter a fig.
Yes, there was a lot of trivial stuff. There was a lot of celebrity stuff. It was the staple diet of our readers, and that's what we were catering for. It was a business at the end of the day. We weren't on some sort of moral crusade. We were giving the readers what they wanted.
at the 2009 McTaggart Lecture at the Edinburgh International Television Festival, James Murdoch was a speaker, and his presentation was bizarrely entitled The Absence of Trust. He finished his presentation by saying the only reliable, durable and perpetual guarantor of independence is profit. Now, obviously, you have to make a profit or you can't survive, but it was such a bizarre thing to say, and unfortunately, profit's fine, but you can't make profit indulging in criminal activities.
I'm not sure about the profit thing. We've never made a day's profit in independent. If I saw profit, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I'd stare at this figure in disbelief. And we do quite nicely not making a profit.